Hello, welcome to the first in the series of webinars for Ayurveda awareness. I'm Terra Rafael, Ayurvedic practitioner, Maya abdominal therapist, energy healer, and former midwife who specializes in women's holistic health. And I'm here to teach you some of the basics today of Ayurveda. To begin with, I'm going to tell you a little story about how the elements of nature were created according to ancient teachings from India. So, in the beginning, the world was unmanifest, just consciousness, pure consciousness. From that state, the subtle vibrations of the cosmic soundless manifested. And we'll be chanting Om soon. From the subtle vibrations of Om came the ether or space element. This ethereal element then began to move, and through its subtle movements, it created the air element. The movement of air produced friction, and that created light and heat. And that is how fire came into being. Thus, the ether produced the air produced the fire, and then the heat of the fire dissolved and liquefied some of the ethereal elements and formed water. Water then, some of it solidified to form the molecules of earth. And in this way, the ether or space coming from Om manifested the four elements of air, fire, water, and earth. From earth, all the organic living beings, all of the physical bodies were formed for plants and animals. And it also formed all the inorganic substances that make up the minerals. And so out of the five elements, all matter was born. As you'll see in this class, from those five elements, we can learn how to create a balance within our own system, our own personal energy system that will bring us closer to our ideal health and wellness, both physically, mentally, and also spiritually. So let's begin with 3 ohms. Peace. When we chant Om, part of the reason to chant it is to draw our mental and subtle energies towards that source that was before the physical was created. And so it brings us to a unified place between us and all of creation. So we're going to talk about the doshas. This is one of the most basic of the concepts of Ayurveda, and I have created a little slideshow to help so many of the things we're going to talk about. It's from this basis of the doshas, and we'll be talking about some of the a couple other concepts today that will go forward first in trying to interpret your own energies, your own body and mind, to see what doshas may need to be balanced. And then the third class is about the use of simple remedies that you can do yourself to help balance your Vata, Pitta, and or Kapha. The next class is about doing your best to inform your digestive fire, to really help your digestive fire to be strong, and to learn that we have digestive fire not just in our digestive tract, but also in all the cells of our body, including our brain and our mind, that we must digest things, not just the food we take in, but everything that impacts us needs to be digested. And when our digestion is strong, then we do not have toxins that can build up with a weak digestive system that can clog our channels and keep the energy from flowing, keep the physical from flowing in ways that keep us healthy and strong. The final of the 5 classes at this time is about Ayurvedic daily routine. And this is a way to create a container that can help you have a real common way of balancing each day and taking care of yourself in a way that's sustainable. So let's move forward with learning our basic concepts today. I'll get our slideshow up and then we'll get going. When you see the slideshow on your screen, if you can, there's a little arrow in the corner where you can actually make the slideshow bigger and fill up your whole screen so it's easier for you to read if you would like. So Ayurveda shows us how to individualize our self-care through understanding the doshas, our constitution and condition. We learn the doshas through sight, sound, movement, taste, smell, and touch. So the doshas are going to be something that you'll start noticing all throughout your day. And in that way, you'll soon become proficient in understanding what you need to do to balance yourself. Understanding the doshas will help them to determine what our constitution and condition is, and we'll talk about why that's important. And then we'll also touch on in the following webinars how you can use these more in your daily life. So again, just as I mentioned earlier, the 5 elements are what make up the doshas and make up all of creation. So let's begin with Vata dosha. So Vata dosha is made up of ether and air, and as we learned just now, the ether and air are the first elements that were created. They're the most subtle elements. And from the ether and the air, working together, this bioenergetic concept of a dosha has been made, this Vata dosha. The qualities of the Vata dosha go along with ether and air, so if you can't remember them just by memorizing them, you can just think of what the air is like, how it's dry, it's cold, it cools things down in general by evaporation, if nothing else. It's light, the air is very light. It's changeable, the air changes as it moves. It's mobile, it's often moving, and it's rough in that it creates roughness wherever it goes. It ripples things, it blows things, it creates disturbance. So, in our bodies, all of the doshas are in every single cell, in every atom, in fact. However, there's a place in the body where each of the doshas is more predominant and more important. It's its home or seat. And in our human bodies, the abdomen and the pelvis is where Vata is most predominant. It's seated there. And when it's working in that area in a balanced way, then all else will work much easier. So the main structures and functions that it is involved with are respiration, which of course deals with air, hearing, which is about the vibrations of air, the nervous function, because as you may know, the nervous system is about moving, communicating information from one place to the other, from one kind of cell to another. And there's also the little gap between the nervous cells where the signal jumps across, and that's a very Vata thing, jumping. So the nervous system is very much related to Vata. The bones, and even though we may think of bones as being very solid, they are solid compared to most of the flesh of the body. However, they're really very changeable. The bones will become stronger or weaker. They are always moving calcium and other minerals in and out. It's like the bones are like a storehouse of minerals in our body, and when we don't have enough in our blood, then it moves from our bones into the bloodstream. And the bones also, even though when you see a dead bone, it's very rigid and such, they're very, they have space within them, and they are somewhat flexible, and that's what prevents them from snapping and breaking too easily. So people who have somewhat flexible bones are much less likely to have a break at any point. So the bones are Vata, but they do have Kapha in them. Elimination is important for Vata because it's movement. It's moving through the colon and out, or moving through the bladder and out at the right time and the right place. Ejaculation and orgasm are both contained by the Vata element or the Vata dosha. They're ruled by that because they have to do with movement. They have to do with a kind of expansion, which Vata often is involved with, and childbirth, and also menstruation are functions, as well as ovulation. Those are all functions relating to Vata because they are about holding on and letting go at the right time. Mostly it's knowing when to let go. That's what Vata helps us with. So those are some of the main qualities, and we'll be talking about more about Vata in a bit. Now we're going to move to Pitta. Pitta is mostly fire with just a touch of water in it. And you know, frankly, I don't understand about the water in the fire in terms of how it came about. Maybe some of the water that was being created by the Pitta element has remained with it rather than separating into become part of the Kapha or the water element itself. The main qualities of Pitta are relating to the fire. It is hot, it's sharp, it's oily. So just as fire is fed by oil, Pitta is very in tune with oil and is supported by oil. And it spreads. It doesn't jump so much Sometimes there's some Vata or wind that will cause the fire to jump, but usually it just spreads, and it may spread from its seat, which is the solar plexus and small intestine. Sometimes Pitta will spread with gravity down into the uterus, for instance, and cause Pitta problems there if Vata isn't out of balance. So that's the spreading of Pitta. The main functions and structures of Pitta are digestion and enzymes. So that's digestion not only in the digestive tract, but in all the cells. It has to do with metabolism and the release of energy. So vision is Pitta because vision is about interpretation of the light energy entering into the eye and through the eyes into the brain. Mental processing. So again, we digest what we see with our senses. What we gain through our interaction with the outer world must be processed and put into order, and Pitta does that. It also rules the red blood cells. Red is one of the main colors of Pitta, and the red blood cells carry oxygen, which is crucial for the metabolism that goes on in that Pitta rules. It also is associated with the skin because skin is very much skin problems are due to too much Pitta going into the blood and then into the skin. And muscles. Muscles go along with the strength that comes from Pitta and are involved with focused movement. And focus is one of Pitta's qualities. Kapha is made up of water and earth, and Kapha is something we can actually hold in our hands. Vata is more subtle. We can't grab it really. And Pitta, of course, it's too hot. We can't really hold on to Pitta in our hands. But Kapha, we can hold water, we can hold earth. And in the same way, Kapha works in our bodies. It's the container. It fills in, it makes us solid. And so the main qualities of Kapha are heavy, moist, cold, viscous, inert, meaning not movable, and dense. So those are all qualities that you can think of coming from water. And very much one substance that is very much kapha that is in our body is mucus. So if you think of what mucus is like, that is a lot of the main of kapha. The place that kapha lives most fully is in our chest because of our heart and our lungs and our stomach. Those are more kaphic organs that have to do with moisture. Even our lungs, even though our lungs are ruled by Vata in respiration, the actual physical lungs have to have moisture in them to really open and close and work properly. So there's a lot of moisture involved with the lungs. The main structures and functions of kapha are fluid balance, taste, which depends upon fluid, and you can't really taste something if there's dryness, and that's why we have saliva to help moisten our food and to help digest it in its own way. It carries some of the digestive properties of Pitta in it, the saliva. Kidneys, again, due to the way that it kidneys are important to balancing the fluids in our body. Plasma, which is the liquid portion of our blood, is Kapha. Cerebrospinal fluid, which bathes our spine and our brain and keeps it in its healthy form. Fat tissue, which also protects our body organs and is one of the main components of our brains, in a way insulating our nervous system so it doesn't short circuit. And joint lubrication is so very important because even though the bones support our body, to move we must have lubrication in our joints. And kapha is what allows us, with the moist kind of juices, the fluids of the synovial joints, and also keeping them from drying out is a challenge as we age, because we tend to lose some of our kapha as we age. So when the doshas are balanced, they have certain qualities that we all look for in ourselves and in others. So Vata gives flow, flexibility, creativity, and enthusiasm. Pitta gives strong digestion and assimilation of both physical and mental elements. It gives us focus. It gives intelligence and leadership. Kapha gives structure. Kapha is the container within which Vata and Pitta can work, and it gives strength and endurance that allow that leadership and intelligence, that creativity and enthusiasm to have a basis to be in the world. When there is too much of one of the doshas, it can cause different physical and emotional manifestations. So Vata, when there's too much air, too many of the qualities of Vata, the dryness, there can actually be constipation, which is the opposite of movement. There can be gas, shakiness, cramps, and fatigue. So emotionally, too much Vata creates overwhelm, grief, and fearfulness. So a stereotype of Vata is someone who you would call a space case. They just don't seem grounded. They kind of go from one thing to the next. It is a Vata tendency, for instance, to go from one kind of healing modality to the next, feel their ungroundedness, but because they keep moving and changing from one thing to another, nothing has a chance to really work. So Vata can become too expanded. The space element, when there's too much space, some Vatas will become so expanded that they can't move and they become immobilized and rigid. So that space also comes into play when Vatas like to say yes to everything. They're very enthusiastic, and if they get too enthusiastic and say yes to too many things, then eventually what happens, they're like a souffle that expands with the air, and it expands, but then it expands too far, and then it pops and falls down. And that's when you find the Vata feeling of overwhelm, where the person will be hiding in their bedroom and cover it up with blankets and just not want to do anything with the world because it's just too much for them. So that's why Vatas need routine and discipline in their lives to make a container that will be able to allow their creativity to flow and create, but not become overwhelmed. Um, and it's very important for Vatas, but all kinds of people to avoid mental problems, to create and to use their creative energy in a positive way, um, creating things in the world to ground their creative Vata energy so it doesn't rise up and cause mental disturbances. So Pitta, when there's too much fire in the system, we get burning kinds of sensations, heartburn, we get skin rashes and acne. There can be diarrhea, inflammation, which also has a Vata component to it. Um, any kind of bleeding, excess menstrual cycles, or any bleeding problems like bleeding gums, or bloodshot eyes, or anemia, even though it's a lack of red blood cells, because Pitta rules the red blood cells. Anemia, or things that have to do with the red blood cells, is a Pitta um, disturbance. Pitta is also associated with fevers and infections. So when there's an infection, you might notice that the mucus or the area becomes colorful. Like the skin could become red and hot and inflamed around a wound that is infected, or there can be discharge from the wound, or say you have mucus. If you have infected sinuses, the mucus won't just be whitish or clear, the mucus will be greenish or yellow, and that indicates Pitta is there as an infection. Emotionally, Pitta will cause anger, irritability, and being overly critical. Because Pitta mind is very sharp, it can come out of the mouth in a sharp way. Um, and so, because Pitta also gives focus, sometimes Pitta people become very impatient. And this leads to the irritability, the impatience with others who are not coming along the way they want them to. they they may feel like they're the leader and they're saying, "Why aren't you following me? Come on, hurry up." um, so a type A person is a um, stereotype of a Pitta person, someone who is driven. They're overly ambitious, they're overly focused, they work too much, they don't pay attention to their bodies or to the other people's needs. They're just focused on one goal. Um, so those are Pitta people that are out of balance. And so if there's a way to appeal to their inner intelligence to help them see that, then there are ways to balance out their Pitta and help them be more of a good leader and an intelligent person that can focus and get things done. Kapha, when there's too much kapha, there can be too much weight, because kapha is about the tissue, so there can be too much tissue. So there can be too much weight, too much mucus, too much fluid retention. There can be tumors and growths. There can be congestion or stagnation because of the lack of movement that kapha can make when there's too much of it. So emotionally, too much kapha can cause denial. Kaphas will often not acknowledge that there's a problem going on, and this is an extreme expression of their ability of stamina, where they can let things roll off them and not affect them. They're thick-skinned. They don't take things in too deeply, so they're kind of like, oh, everything's okay. But if they go too far with this denial, it can affect their lives and those of the people around them if they're not acknowledging some problems that need to be dealt with. They can also tend towards greed, and their kind of greed is about accumulation. Kapha, as you can see, we talked about the excess weight, excess mucus. Well, it can do this on an outward basis and accumulate things, and not necessarily valuable things. That would be more ambitious. No, they can accumulate just anything and everything, and that's what hoarders are a example of an extreme kind of kapha mind condition where they just save everything and fill up their whole space with stuff that for the most part is junk, but they're accumulating it. They feel the need to accumulate it. Another stereotype of a kapha is a couch potato, uh, which is a phrase meaning someone who will sit in front of a TV or a screen and just be there all day, not moving, and be eating while they watch something, being somewhat passive and just taking things in. Taking things in, again, that accumulating tendency. And again, all of these people who are out of balance, if we can get to them in a way that will help them see that they are out of balance and acknowledge it and that they want to change it, then we can give them some help through Ayurveda. So the doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, also relate with time, different modes of time. So during the daytime, from 2 a.m. to sunrise and 2 p.m. to sunset are Vata times of day. Those are times of day when you have a Vata disturbance. You might wake up in the night before sunrise and find it difficult to go back to sleep. Or in the afternoon, you might find yourself being tired. Energy might go down for Vata. For Pitta times a day is from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., which is around midnight, the hours before and after midnight. And in the daytime, it's the hours around noon, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So the daytime hours are when Pitta is best at digesting food. And so that's when it's best to eat your largest meal, if at all possible. And then from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is when the liver and gallbladder and the small intestines are detoxing, and I must help my throat. It's being very active while this talking and drying out, so I add some liquid to balance that dryness. Okay. So Pitta people often, when there's too much Pitta, they often stay up late at night. And when they do that, they're not allowing their liver to detox, which in turn creates more Pitta. So it's a vicious cycle. And they often will say they can't go to sleep. Some people can't go to sleep. But if you go to sleep before 10, if you can move your sleep time so that you're going to bed right around 10 or 10:30, that you may find that it's easier to actually go to sleep than if you try at 11. Because once the Pitta starts being active in the night, it can give you a second wind, and it often will make you hungry. So if you have any eating problems, you will likely want to eat again at nighttime as well, right when you should be detoxing. So the Kapha times a day are sunrise to 10 a.m. and sunset to 10 p.m. So the morning Kapha is an excellent time to exercise. Um, and Kaphas should get up before sun. If you have too much Kapha, or if you are a Kapha person, that will help you keep from adding more Kapha. In fact, if you sleep past sunrise, you'll tend to have kind of a groggy heaviness when you wake up in general, more than if you get up right at sunrise or just a little before sunrise. Um, so sunset to 10 p.m. is a good time to just have a sociable time, to be doing something mildly stimulating. You don't want to be too stimulated before bedtime, but socializing is really good, and things that will stimulate without getting your adrenals going. um, so the times of year for Vata is the fall and the dry winter, which in Colorado we kind of have a dry winter and a wet winter. The dry winter starts right after the fall and goes until usually February or so, and then February and March and April is when there could be a wet winter with wet snows. And then the wet snows are Kapha, and that's when there can be a little warmer days. Things are melting and spring is starting to come. And then the springtime comes and we have rains, and sometimes we'll have rains, but we'll have things coming back to life. And the beginnings of life are Kapha. And then summertime comes and Pitta is predominant. So you can see that, for instance, in the summer, there's more daylight. Morning, because the sun will rise earlier for Kapha, but in the evening, the sunset is late and there's not as much sunset time before 10 p.m. And that plays into how the heat accumulates during the day. So for our life cycle, the childhood is Kapha, which explains that mysterious thing that happens with children, that they have so much mucus. But they are growing, and that is a Kapha thing, that kind of growing into adult form. And then the more adult form is Pitta, the reproductive years, when we have our reproductive hormones and sexual desires and ambition for working and career. Those are all Pitta things, and those are in the reproductive years of our lives. And then the elder years come, and we're more Vata. We will be drying out to a certain extent. We'll be getting a little spacier. Our organs will be aging, and our weaknesses will come out more easily. And so our skin will get thinner and so forth. So the elder years, everyone gets more Vata. And then in the reproductive cycle for women, there are also these phases that we go through of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And that's one reason why women can be very changeable. Some are more in tune with this, are more sensitive to it than others. For instance, Vata people may be more susceptible to how their cycles change. So now we're going to talk about, now that we have kind of a small introduction to the doshas, your biggest way of learning about the doshas is now to look around you wherever you go, whatever people you meet, whatever situations you're in, and start to guess. Oh, I think this is a Vata situation that I'm in. We're in painting class. Yes, it's very Vata, a creative situation. Oh, it's raining out and cold today. It's a more of a Kapha day today. And that's true. And so forth. And just by looking at different foods, at looking at your body and noticing the different ways, you will start to look at things in terms of the doshas, and that will eventually give you the tools without memorizing all the millions of lists that you can find of what foods to eat or what to do or not do. You will start to tap into your own inner knowledge about the doshas and how to use them in your daily life. So one way to understand this intellectually is to know that we all have a constitution that we're born with. And this is what is a normal level for Vata, Pitta, and Kapha for us individually. It doesn't mean when we're balanced that Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are equal. What it means is that we have the amount of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha that we were born to have. And we can express this as a number from 1 to 3 for each of the doshas. And I think of it like containers. So I was born with a constitution of Vata 3, Pitta 2, Kapha 2. So I have a bigger container for Vata and smaller ones for Pitta and Kapha. And this comes from heredity, from my parents, from their condition at my conception, at the prenatal influences that came through my mother when she was pregnant with me, and spiritual influences such as karma or other divine will. This we can figure out the constitution by looking carefully at our lifelong tendencies, what we were like as children as well as adults, and also we can check it accurately with a pulse reading. And the constitution does not change. That is what stays with us throughout our lives. And it's great that we all have different levels, and that's what makes us have different expressions and different experiences of life, even though we might be in the same situation. So we're all meant to have a different balance, not all be the same. The condition is how much Vata, Pitta, and Kapha is in one's system right now. So again, we give it a number so we can compare it with the constitution. And so, for instance, if I was having extra Vata and extra Kapha, mine might be Vata 4, Pitta 2, Kapha 3, and that would be comparison to my constitution numbers, which are Vata 3, Pitta 2, Kapha 2. So with this kind of a problem, I might have an excess mucus condition that is moving in my body. Probably it could be a sinus problem where there's sinus blockage, not necessarily infected. That would be one example. So the condition is caused by all external and internal influences. So things such as the daily weather, the time of day, the season, the sounds we hear, the sights we see, where we are in the world, the climate, the food and drink we have, our habitual emotions, and our habitual thoughts. So weather, when you don't control the weather, the things we don't have control over, we adapt to and we take them into account, we acknowledge them, and do things to counter the negative influence. So when it's raining, I might decide to stay home, or I might decide if I go out, I'm going to have an umbrella and a raincoat, and I'm going to dress appropriately for the weather. And um, the same thing with the dosha weather. Um, so the things that we don't have control over, we try to counteract with the opposite kinds of influences in the areas we do have control over. So, for instance, we have control over what we hear to a somewhat extent. We have some control over what we see. So when we use the television or the YouTube or the media, what we watch can make us more Vata or more Pitta or more Kapha. And it's important to understand that, and if we want our minds to be balanced. We also have control over, to a certain extent, where we are. Um, and so we can choose to be in a place that is more responsive and helpful to our balance, not only just in an outer way, but also in a social way. We can choose what people that influence us in a positive kind of dosha way, or that avoid those that bring us to a negative kind of place. We want to learn to control our minds and to find how to work with our emotions, not suppressing them, but acknowledging them and not expressing them in ways that will feed our emotions and keep ourselves in a loop. Same with the habitual thoughts, to find ways to get out of habits of thinking that bring us into a diluted or negative thought pattern. So we can determine our condition by our symptoms. So when we have symptoms, they tell us that's more of a Pitta symptom. No, that's more of a Vata symptom, or so forth. And then we can also tell by doing a pulse reading. And that can give us a good idea about how much of the doshas and where we have too much of something and we need to counteract it. So out of balance means of a dosha according to what our constitution requires. And being in balance means that our constitution, our condition are more in balance. Sometimes we can be in balance with our constitution in general, but there can be an imbalance in a certain area or organ of the body. That's another way of being out of balance, but it's not as major. So why does it matter if we're out of balance? Well, early on when we're out of balance, we'll have simple little problems like sneezing or burping or having a cold, and there isn't really a lot to do about it medically, but there are herbs that can either help or strengthen us and counteract that doshic influence. Over time, if you're out of balance the same way for a long time, it will eventually manifest as physical diseases that doctors can recognize, such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, arthritis, or lupus, or many other diseases. So this is just to give you some more visuals on Vata, which is light, mobile, dry, and rough. So the wind moving flags in the breeze, the flags are light and mobile, the wind is light and mobile, and then the dry leaves of fall. They're dry, they're rough, they're brittle, they they make a kind of sharp sound. Those are Vata qualities. Here we have the smoke is another Vata kind of thing. It's light, it's subtle, it moves, it's clear, and it's astringent. Foods that increase Vata are dry and light, like chips, crackers, and popcorn. They're astringent, like potatoes, greens, and sprouts. They're gas-forming, like beans and broccoli. They're cold. Anything cold to eat or drink increases Vata, as well as Kapha. And they're raw things, because raw things tend to be rough. And salads or greens are also light. So those are all examples, kind of categories of foods that increase Vata in your system. So these are just a couple pictures of examples of Vata body type. They're thin, light in general, not always thin and light. Sometimes Vata can create an overweight condition. For instance, if someone is a nervous eater, an emotional eater, that would cause someone to gain weight through Vata cause. Also, sometimes there are other Vata fearfulness or so forth that can cause people to put on weight. The bones and skin are very thin, thinner than average for Vata people. They usually have darker skin for their particular tribe of people. They are often unique, unusual, and creative type people that tend to be sensitive because they have thin skin, physically and emotionally. They can have changeable moods. They often talk and gesture and wiggle around a lot. And they often find it difficult to stick to a regular routine or specific practice and need a lot of support to make changes that are healthier for them. For Vatas, having a set daily routine can be a very good container for their expansive nature and allow them to be more creative. Common signs of Vata excess, too much Vata, are constipation, which can come from not eating enough food, or can have dry skin, hair, dry mouth, dry eyes, dry colon, dry anything, dry yoni. They have pain, such as menstrual cramps or any kind of muscle cramps. They can have no period or irregular periods or far apart periods or really light periods. They have popping joints, or they can have dryness in their joints that causes them to get a dry form of arthritis. They emotionally fearfulness. So Vata people should avoid scary movies and scary action things. Excuse me. They can have tend to sadness or grief, and grief in anyone will make you more Vata. So when you are grieving, it's important to take more Vata soothing measures in your life, even if you're not a Vata person. Overwhelmed feelings, like I mentioned earlier, I talked about that. And then confusion, which is a lack of order in the mind, can come about with too much Vata. Trembling, twitching, And nervous habits are Vata. So people who twiddle their thumbs or tap their knee or tap their foot a lot or are kind of twirling their hair around their finger, those are nervous habits of Vata. Insomnia for Vatas means waking after 2 a.m. and having a difficulty going back to sleep, and they often can have a mind that's going in circles over and over again about something. So ways to soothe Vata excess are opposites. Remember, we use opposite qualities to what is going on. So if there's a lot of dryness, oiliness in healthy oils in the food, massage, oil enemas, you can put oil in all your orifices and it can help some Vata in that area. Um, Warmth, having the outerness warmth, using steam or hot water bottles are better than using saunas, which are dry heat, are not as good for Vatas. Heaviness, so being grounded, using oil, eating heavier foods like sweet potatoes or root vegetables are very good. Routine, having a regular rhythm, especially for eating, sleeping, and having your bowel movement, helps Vata to calm. Gentleness, so feeling safe is really important, and honoring their sensitivity of a Vata person helps them to understand that restricting their life will actually help them to be more creative and more able to fulfill their potential. Containment means wrapping. The joints is one way to help um, contain, activating muscles in poses, wearing girdles or tighter things around the abdomen sometimes. Without, you don't want to cut off the circulation, but to feel contained. If you're feeling really Vata, wearing a hat, wearing scarves and keeping warm around the neck, which I'm doing because I'm talking so much. I need to honor my throat. Sweet, sour, and salty tastes are good to balance Vata. Heavy cooked soups and saucy foods are very good Vata type foods. So you want to avoid excess changes and travel whenever possible. And if you must do those things, have an antidote with these other measures so that you're balancing it. Pitta is fire, hot, sharp, liquid, spreading. And so the fire kind of spreads as it goes. The blood is fleshy, smelling, and pittas tend to have strong body odors. So if you notice you have stronger body odors than usual, that can indicate a pitta excess going on. And again, the skin rashes are very often pitta. And the pitta qualities, mostly hot, sharp, are very strong ones. There's some oily, there's a tendency to oily skin and hair, and you may not digest oils well, especially deep fried food can be very problematical for pitta sometimes. And pitta is spicy in itself, it's burning, so we want to avoid foods that are pitta and getting too much of it. So foods that increase pitta are spicy foods, acidic and sour foods like tomato, citrus, and vinegar. Oily foods, too much oil is going to upset pitta, increase pitta. So watching that. Salty foods, salt is heating, so we don't want to increase that. And fatty meat and egg yolks are also going to increase pitta just like the oil. Pitta body types tend to be medium with sensitive fair skin. Sometimes they have freckles and it may be oily. They're often blondish, reddish hair. They often have intense, focused minds and can be ambitious leaders. They may tend towards anger, irritability, or criticism of others, but also some of them will actually not turn their criticism outwardly but on themselves and criticize themselves for not living up to their high standards. They will best cooperate if they know that it's in their interest, so you must always explain why it's important to them, and they want facts. Common signs of Pitta excess are bleeding of any kind, acidic conditions, heartburn, burning eyes, intolerance of heat, like hot flashes, inflammation, rheumatism, injuries, skin conditions are often Pitta, strong body odors and excess sweat, loose bowels and excess urine, anger, irritability, and a critical nature, being a hothead. And to soothe Pitta, we want the opposites. Cool, cooling things like moonlight, water, like walking by water, sitting by water. Calmness, meditation is really important for everyone, but it's good for Pittas to learn to turn off that focus and ambition and competition. Dryness is important in terms of avoiding oily and fatty foods. Cleanse and support the liver, because the liver is what helps to regulate all that fire of Pitta. Using bitter, astringent, and sweet taste, so vegetables are really, really good for Pitta. Vegetables and greens every day. Eating greens is really helpful. Raw foods, vegetables, especially greens, and sweet fruit, whole grains, and less protein is usually appropriate because protein is heating. So Kapha's qualities are heavy, liquid, cold, hard, gross, and dense. So you can see that in the water, in the rocks, in the snow, in the ice. It's also fog. It's slimy, so like mucus, but also like yogurt. Yogurt is a very kapha food, as is ice cream. And so those increase kapha. And the qualities of kapha, there are many, because between the water and the earth there are many, many more physical qualities to look at. The heavy, slow, cool, oily, liquid, smooth, those all come out in, if you think of yogurt, a lot of them will be given to you by thinking of yogurt as kapha. Foods that increase kapha, cold foods, anything cold, even ice water. Kapha people should not ever drink cold water. It should always be at least room temperature. Heavy, slimy foods like sour cream, yogurt, cottage cheese, fatty foods, oily foods like oil and avocados, sweet foods like desserts, candy, and fruit, especially bananas, are very kapha when they're ripe. Salty foods, because salt holds onto the liquids. That's another quality of salt. So salt is not very good for kapha or pitta. And sour foods such as citrus and vinegar and pickles, because the sour also holds things in and accumulates. And as you remember, that's a bad quality of kapha, that when there's too much kapha, then you don't want those kapha increasing foods. So kapha body types can be overweight, but they can also be not overweight. The woman on the bottom picture was a yoga teacher, and she worked vigorously every day. She did vigorous yoga every single day for a long time. And so she did not gain weight because of that. She needed to keep moving. And Kaphas need that because they tend to have bigger bones, which is good. Um, Strong bones. They have thick hair, often dark and wavy. They have large, watery eyes and large lips and a large nose. They have stable personality and lifestyle, and they tend to be friendly. They're the happy, friendly people. They can tend to be couch potatoes if they don't exercise and keep moving. It helps them to travel, to move, and do things. And they usually come for help only when they're brought by a spouse or friend because of that denial aspect. Common signs of imbalance of kapha are mucus, swelling due to fluid retention, excess weight that's hard to lose. People who keep everything, difficulty letting go of things, situation, the couch potato syndrome, and excess sleep. Ways to balance kapha are stimulation. Kaphas need stimulation. It's the opposite. Vatas are overstimulated more easily. Kaphas need stimulation. They need physical stimulation, daily vigorous exercise, not just a walk. For them, they need really cardiovascular. They need to really move. They need strong emotions to motivate them. They need mental experiences to keep their mind from just staying in a stagnant position. And they need social stimulation. Travel and new places are very beneficial for kapha people. Bitter, pungent, and astringent tastes are good. They're reducing, so they help kapha let go. Salads, cooked greens, and light veggies, spicy beans are good for kapha. And kaphas should avoid dairy, excess carbs, and sweets, oils, and fats. So today we've talked about your constitution condition. You may want to have the help of an Ayurvedic practitioner. There are lots of charts, and a lot of people have taken these little surveys to figure out what their doshas are, but it's very difficult to actually tell what is your constitution and what is your condition when you do those charts, and then it's difficult to compare them on the charts. So I think you would do just as well to really just pay attention to your body and learn through this course how to determine more accurately how your what your constitution might be. And also it's worthwhile just to have at least one session with an Ayurvedic practitioner to find out what your constitution condition is. Then once you know where you're out of balance, and that's part of what you're going to learn in the next session, then you will find ways to balance through your eating habits, your food, your activity level, and what you do, and your environment, the people you associate with it, but actually even more importantly, your mind and emotions, and what to cultivate in your mind and emotions. So I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I hope you'll join us for the other sessions. And as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, yes, that I'll probably add one more session about the mind, because the mind is so crucial in being able to follow a regime, to come up with it, and to also bring you to a more clear place where eventually when your mind has clarity, you will make choices in a way that is healthier for you. So please come to the next session as soon as you may, to find out about the simple assessment of your doshas with Ayurveda. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us. And as you become more healthy and aware, that will spread through that consciousness, and the best will come out in you possible, and the world needs all of our best efforts. Thank you so much.